Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello guys, how are you doing? I hope you're doing great. So, my name is Hendriyana. My ID number is 182122071, and I am the first presenter from group 4, and we are going to present the material from chapter 4 from Lion Cheng and Jenna Fox book, and this chapter is focus on how do we develop a high quality classroom test. Okay, let's strike to the material. The first is developing the test. In this part, we have designed a test based on 3 of the key standards we can apply in judging the quality of a test. What are they? The first is measures what we intended to measure. So this is related to the validity of the test. Yeah? For example, when we want to measure on a certain student's English skill, let's say writing skill, so our test also should focus on it, the content and the task method. For example, should focus on writing skill, encourage their writing skill, so not too broad on the other things. And then in addition, the test makes operational the learning that we are working towards in our classroom by translating what we define as learning into what we can measure in the test. So there is a valid relation between the activities in the classroom with the test that we are going to convey to the learners. And the next point we have adequately represents or samples the outcomes, learning outcomes, and then clear content, skills, abilities, and also knowledge we are missing. Then last one is elicits information that is useful in informing our teaching and in supporting the learning of our students' activities. Yeah. In this part, back again, there is inextricably link between the class activities or the information that we convey in the class with the test, with the information in the test. So the content should valid and should related. Yeah. So the next slide we have key terms and concept in test development. So in this part divided into different categories, and the first categories or the first part is a construct definition. When we talking about construct or construction, it's kinds of foundation or framework when we are going to construct or to build something, and this is also happen in a test. So we are going to focus on developing a construct of the test when we develop the test. So the initial things is the mandate. So the mandate or our desire that we want to use a test as our assessment tool, and that's the mandate. And after we decided the mandate, we are going to focus on the purpose of the test, and the purpose itself should clearly understood and then clearly stated. And here I give you an example. So let's take a look. We are teaching English to a group of adult learners who are studying in order to pass a high-stakes test of proficiency and enter a university degree program. What in our view as a teachers are the language abilities, performance, and skills that should be tested in order to determine whether the students have sufficient English to enroll in a university academic program, whether it's engineering, business, history, or the others. So The purposes is kinds of our view, such as language abilities, performance, and skills, and so on. So the purposes should clearly stated. Then next, criterion and norm reference assessment. So in this part, we are going to define what is criterion and norm reference assessment. From the book, I give you the statement that how we define the construct of our test will influence all other aspects of our test. This is related to the previous one, yeah. And how we construct of our test is also we can use a criterion and norm reference assessment. This is kinds of guide for you in developing assessment. So what is criterion reference test? So it's all about design to measure a student's academic performance against some standard of criteria. For example, of criterion reference statement. Just take a look on the example. Here, skill, reading sample criterion descriptor. Student at level 3 will be able to guess the meaning of an unfamiliar word by using cues provided by surrounding text. So that's for the example of criterion reference statement. And then it's a raised question. Now, why criterion and norm reference assessment is pretty important? What the purpose? What are they? Then here, the main purposes of criterion reference assessment is to describe what students know and can do. Yeah. Then compare a student's performance with other students, or to rank a student's performance on the basis of the test performance of their peers. For example, from high to lows. Yeah. And this is related to a test or assessment procedure which called norm reference assessment. Yeah. To discriminate between students. So discriminate in this case is happen when you are rank students from low to high, and then for example you can evaluate if you don't have a problem with such a high rank student, for example, because they we can say they success in learning, and then we are going to focus on the low rank students, so we can evaluate from it, and we can think how we can treat them and how we can help them to more successful in learning. Yeah. Okay, moving on to the next slide, we have target language use, or TLU domain. So why is it important to use target language? Yeah, it happened because language changes in relation to the context in which we use it. Let's say when we are read the news about, for example, about health news in the newspaper, and then we moving on to the next page and we find out the news about for example sports, and we can feel that the difference is really contrast. Yeah, the context and the language style, the language, for example, language form in between the sport news and the health news is pretty different. That's why this is happen. For example, when we interpret a criterion, we may want to add some context to an item or task in our test, yeah, to make it more understandable and more easy to understand, yeah, for us. However, if we want to limit our task to a specific context, we will be engaging in domain reference assessment, or the assessment of language for specific purposes, as stated from Douglas in 2000. Yeah. and only the language that is typically used and tasks that routinely occur within the domain and will be selected for use in our test. So you can use that style or that technique from Douglas in 2000. Moving on to the next slide, here we have the important role of task specification. So what is task specification? Why is it important? So when we write out information about what our task is measuring, we are engaged in on it in task specification writing. In other words, this is kinds of map, this kinds of blueprint or receipt for our task. So back again, this is really important because when we write task specification or task you are developing as a teacher, this will allow you to, the first one, generate other tasks for other classes at equivalent levels of difficulty. Then second, accumulate systematic information about what you are testing and what your students are learning. Then next, document over time the relative performance of groups in your program. And the last one is increase the clarity of your pupils and directly support the link between testing and teaching. So if we take a conclusion from both important things above, task specification should be detailed enough to allow another teacher or group of teachers to develop a task that is similar to ours. And task specification also let teachers and task developers develop such multiple versions of a task which are arguably parallel or as similar as possible. It indicates that task specification is also not fixed. They evolve and over time they tend to stabilize. Developing a task specification also can be very helpful means of encouraging collaboration and cohesion within a program as participating teachers in preparing the test. So this is kinds of the chance or the good way for the teacher such collaboration with other teachers. And define task specification is also as part of a task development project. In other words, the process of negotiating specification for a task is an excellent opportunity for teachers' professional development. So that's the material from me, and I hope you guys can understand and take content from it. So I'm sorry if I made a lot of mistake, and now we are going to move to another presenter, to the second presenter. So thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye bye.